What if I told you some spirits never left their graves, and tonight they might be watching you? If you love ghost stories, hit subscribe, tap like, and share this video so we can bring you even more terrifying tales. Subscribe, like, share to keep the ghosts coming.
The Phantom Piano of Varosha, a ghost story of Cyprus the sea never forgets. It rolls endlessly against the land, carrying with it fragments of stories, secrets, and sorrows. On the eastern shore of Cyprus, where the Mediterranean stretches into a shimmering horizon, there is a city that once glittered like a crown. Varosha, the forbidden district of Famagusta. For decades, its towers and hotels stood behind barbed wire, sealed from the world, a ghost city shimmering under the ruthless sun. The silence of Varosha is not a silence of emptiness. It is the silence of something held back, restrained, like a breath that has lasted far too long. Even before explorers crept into its abandoned hotels and sun-bleached boulevards, the city had become legend, a place where time was cut short in 1974, frozen mid-motion, abandoned by life yet stubbornly clinging to memory. Among its many ruins, one story began to echo louder than others. It was the story of a piano. Not just any piano, but a grand instrument once placed in the lobby of a glamorous hotel, where hands played nightly to serenade the wealthy and the wandering. In 2017, an English urban explorer claimed he entered that forgotten hotel and heard the instrument being played, notes cutting through the dust-laden air, sharp and deliberate. No one was there. No living musician touched its keys, and yet the sound rang true. This is not merely the story of one explorer's fright. It is a story woven from silence, memory, and the strange persistence of the human spirit. It is about a city that became a tomb, and about music that should not exist but does, carrying with it the weight of grief and the resonance of longing. It is about ghosts, not just of the dead, but of the living who never returned, the thousands who fled, and the moments abandoned mid-breath. To tell the story of the Phantom Piano of Varosha, we must go back to the beginning before the silence, back to when the city breathed and sang, the glitter of a lost paradise. In the early 1970s, Varosha was the heart of Cypriot luxury. The district stretched along the golden sands of Famagusta Bay, its coastline lined with high-rise hotels and sparkling resorts. The King George Hotel, the Asterias, the Argo, and dozens more opened their doors to the rich and curious. Hollywood royalty like Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, Sophia Loren and Brigitte Bardot came to sip champagne under the Mediterranean stars. The lobbies of these hotels were filled with the sound of music, the hum of voices, the clink of glasses, and often the soft, intoxicating notes of piano players. Each evening, as the sun sank and painted the sea in shades of rose and gold, guests would drift into the lounges, where pianos gleamed under chandeliers. Music was the atmosphere of Varosha. It gilded the nights with romance, smoothed over political unease, and lulled the restless with melodies that seemed eternal. One hotel in particular, whose name has been lost to official records but remembered in whispers among explorers, housed a grand piano in its lobby. It was said to have been imported from Vienna in the 1950s, crafted with precision, polished to a mirror sheen. Tourists remembered it as much as the view from their balconies. The pianist, a man known only as Andreas in some recollections, played every evening, sometimes classics, sometimes Cypriot folk songs transformed into rich ballads. His music became a backdrop for conversations that would never be finished, love affairs that would never resume. Then came the summer of 1974. The silence descends. The invasion of Cyprus by Turkish forces changed everything in a matter of hours. Residents of Varosha fled with nothing but their clothes, convinced they would return within days once peace was restored. But the return never came. The Turkish military fenced off the district, forbidding entry. For decades, the city stood sealed like a coffin. Inside, life froze mid-breath. Cars were abandoned on streets, their tires rotting in the heat. Dresses still hung in boutique windows, their colors fading to pale ghosts. Dinner tables were left set, glasses untouched as though waiting for hosts who never came back. And in the grand hotel lobby, the piano remained. The sea battered the coast. Salt crept into walls, and vines pressed through broken windows. Yet still the piano stood, an object both fragile and stubborn, its ivory keys yellowing, its body cracking. It waited. This is where the story grows strange. The explorer's tale in 2017, an Englishman whose name remains deliberately obscured in online forums crossed into Varosha. He was an urban explorer, One who sought the abandoned, the derelict, the forgotten. He had walked the halls of hospitals where beds still bore rusted frames, factories where dust had smothered machines, even prisons where bars stood unbroken but life had long since departed. But nothing prepared him for Varosha. He described entering through a breach in the fencing, slipping past warnings and soldiers. The streets struck him with their eerie perfection. Entire boulevards lined with hotels and shops, but no sound of traffic, no trace of footsteps. Sand had spilled into roads, carried by the sea, and balconies hung precariously over sidewalks like skeletal jaws. When he entered the Piano Hotel, it was twilight. The lobby was drenched in shadow, light filtering only through cracked windows. Dust floated in the air like ash. And there against the far wall he saw the piano. At first he thought nothing of it. It was a relic, a piece of furniture, something to photograph for his archive. He raised his camera. Then a note rang out, the note that should not be. He described the sound as crisp and bright, not the dull groan one might expect from a warped instrument. It was unmistakably a piano note. He froze. His companions looked at him, their faces pale, and then another note followed. Not random, not clumsy, but deliberate. A small sequence of 3, then 4. He swore there was no one near the piano. The lobby was empty, yet the sound persisted. Single keys pressed slowly, a hesitant chord, a pause, then another note. He described it as though someone unseen was testing the keys, preparing to play, but never fully beginning. That was the moment the explorer admitted he felt something more than fear. He felt sorrow. The sound was lonely, as if it had waited decades to be heard again. It was not the crashing poltergeist noise of Hollywood horror, but something quieter, more unsettling. The persistence of memory made audible. He and his companions did not approach. They stood listening for minutes that felt eternal, until the music stopped. Then silence reclaimed the lobby. They left quickly. The persistence of stories since that account, the phantom piano has become one of the defining ghost stories of Varosha. Some dismiss it as embellishment. Others point out that explorers' minds are often influenced by atmosphere. What they think they hear may be shaped by expectation. But others insist, music carries memory more powerfully than sight or touch. If anything could haunt Varosha, it would not be footsteps, not whispers, but music. The piano becomes more than wood and string. It becomes the voice of the city, singing in defiance of silence. It becomes the memory of 1974 refusing to die, and so the stage is set. Varosha is not merely a ruined city. It is a labyrinth of memory, grief, and the strange energies that dwell where history has been violently cut short. The piano is its oracle, its phantom hymn. But to truly understand the haunting, we must go deeper. We must walk through the layers of ghostly resonance, through the shadows of exile, through the metaphysical weight of a place that remembers too much. Varosha is not haunted by one ghost, but by thousands. The piano is only the beginning. Building the haunting, the silence of Varosha is not empty. It is pregnant, swollen with memory, thick with the weight of what has been left behind. Silence in this city is never absence. It is a presence in itself, a living thing. For those who have dared to walk its streets, the air is heavy in ways that cannot be explained by dust or heat. It is as though the atmosphere has absorbed everything. Laughter, screams, footsteps, piano chords, and now releases them in strange fragments. It is said that memory has a frequency, and that some places continue to vibrate with what they once contained. Varosha, above all, hums with that frequency. Explorers tell stories of voices carried on the wind. Not shouts, not clear speech, but fragments, like a conversation overheard in another room. The sea breeze, funneling through broken balconies and jagged window frames, creates tones that mimic human whispers, but sometimes the words feel too clear, too directed. One visitor swore he heard a woman's voice calling a name, Nico, just as he passed a deserted cafe. He stopped, expecting to see another trespasser, but found only overturned chairs and faded posters of Coca-Cola girls smiling from 1973. He left quickly, but the name echoed in his ears long afterward, as if it had been meant for him. Others have reported the sensation of being followed, the sound of footsteps behind them on sand-covered streets. When they turn, there is nothing, and yet the steps continue, sometimes pacing, sometimes running, until they stop as suddenly as they began. Some skeptics claim the sand itself makes strange noises when it shifts under weight, creating illusions of pursuit. But those who have felt the chill of breath on their neck, or the distinct sense of someone standing just behind their shoulder, will not dismiss it so easily. The hotels are the lungs of Varosha, once filled with voices, now filled with echoes. In nearly every account, the lobbies feel heavier than the streets outside, as if the buildings themselves have become tombs that breathe. Explorers entering these spaces describe not just silence, but pressure, a kind of invisible weight pressing down. Dust thickens the air, shadows feel alive. Mirrors, still intact in some lobbies, hold strange reflections. Explorers see themselves standing where they are, but with shadows stretched unnaturally long, or with figures faintly present behind them. And always there is the piano. Even if not the same piano described in the 2017 account, almost every grand hotel had one. The sight of these instruments, cracked and decayed, seems to unnerve visitors more than any other relic. Perhaps it is because a piano is not simply furniture. It is an object meant for human hands. Its silence feels unnatural, its presence accusatory. Some explorers claim that when they approach these pianos, the air shifts colder, as if the room itself exhales. One account tells of a man who touched a key out of curiosity. It did not make a sound, strings long since broken, but moments later, from somewhere deeper in the hotel, another piano answered faintly, with a single note. The story of the English explorer who heard the piano has spread like fire among the community of ghost seekers. Soon others began to embellish, to reinterpret, to expand. That is how legends are born, not from one truth but from many half-truths stitched together. Some began to claim that the phantom pianist could be seen, not just heard. Reports emerged of a figure in formal wear, a tuxedo frayed with time, sitting at the piano in the dim light of dusk. His head was always bowed, his fingers moving though no sound came. Only when the witness drew closer did the sound begin, the piano suddenly alive, and the figure dissolve into dust. Others said the ghost was not a man at all, but a woman. A singer, perhaps, who had once accompanied the pianist in the lounge, her voice now reduced to distant humming that drifts through the halls. The details change, but the core remains. Someone is still playing. Someone refuses to leave the piano behind. To understand Varosha's haunting, one must think of it not as a single ghost story, but as overlapping strata. There are the personal ghosts, the pianist, the whispers of names, the apparitions in mirrors. These are tied to individual memory, singular lives cut short or interrupted. Then there are the collective ghosts, the weight of 40,000 people forced to flee, their absence lingering as a kind of pressure. It is said that when a city dies suddenly, it releases an echo that lasts centuries. Varosha did not decay slowly. It was silenced in an instant. That silence itself became a haunting. And finally, there are the spiritual ghosts, not human at all, but forces that emerge when grief saturates a place. Some believe Varosha is not haunted by individuals, but by grief itself, a sentient sorrow that takes shape in sound and shadow. The phantom piano is not a ghost, but the city's soul attempting to speak. It is at night that Varosha truly awakens. The Mediterranean moon casts silver over broken glass, and the hotels become black silhouettes against the restless sea. Explorers who linger past dusk speak of strange phenomena, lights flickering in upper windows where no electricity remains, shadows crossing balconies though no living thing could be there, faint strains of music carried on the wind. One man described standing on the beach, looking back at the skyline, when he saw a row of rooms lit on the top floor of a hotel. Each window glowed softly, as though lamps had been switched on. Then, one by one, the lights went dark again, as if someone were walking past and extinguishing them. He fled before the last window went black. Others report seeing gatherings, crowds of pale figures standing silently in the streets, only to dissolve when approached. The brain explains such things as tricks of moonlight, as pareidolia, the human tendency to find faces in shadows, but those who have felt surrounded by these figures insist the presence was real, that they could feel the crowd breathing. The sea is not silent in Varosha. It is relentless, rushing, roaring, whispering against the abandoned promenade. Some explorers claim that when they stand at the edge of the water, they can hear voices carried in the waves. Songs, laughter, cries. One woman swore she heard the sound of children splashing. Though the beach was empty, the piano, too, is sometimes heard faintly from the sea, as though its notes escape the hotels and ride the wind over the water. Sailors passing the coast have told of strange music reaching their ears at night. Always faint, always fleeting, but impossible to ignore. Every haunted place carries a threshold, a point where the ordinary world fades and the supernatural bleeds through. In Varosha, this threshold is not one doorway, not one room, but the entire city. Once you pass the wire, you are already inside. The rules shift. Some explorers describe sudden dizziness, as if the air itself is thicker. Others speak of dreams that plague them for weeks afterward. Dreams of playing the piano in front of a faceless audience. Dreams of drowning in the sea while music echoes above. Dreams of running through endless hotel corridors that always return to the same locked door. Local spiritualists warn against entering Varosha at all. They say the city is not merely haunted but cursed. When thousands of lives are uprooted violently, their suffering stains the earth. Varosha is not ruins. It is a scar, and scars do not heal quietly. By now, the phantom piano is no longer just a story. It has become an invocation. Explorers entering Varosha often speak of listening, waiting for it. The silence becomes unbearable, and their minds strain to hear notes that may or may not exist. The piano has become the heart of the haunting, the magnet that draws attention. Some occultists have gone further, suggesting that the piano is an anchor, a ritual instrument that holds the spirits bound. Its music is not random but deliberate, an attempt to summon, to communicate, perhaps even to trap. Each note is a spell, each melody a binding. The idea terrifies some and fascinates others. Could a simple piano hold an entire city's grief in its strings? By the time the explorer leaves Varosha, he carries more than photographs. He carries weight, the sense that he has been watched, judged, and perhaps even marked. Many explorers describe leaving the city with an urge to return, as though something calls them back. The piano's unfinished melody is an open question, a hook sunk into the psyche, and so the haunting builds. The whispers become voices, the footsteps become companions. The piano becomes louder, clearer, refusing to remain background noise. The city itself becomes alive with presences that cannot be explained. The stage is set for what comes next, the climax, the moment when the supernatural reveals itself not as suggestion, but as force. Night in Varosha is a wound that never heals. By day, the city appears almost mundane. Decayed balconies, streets filled with sand, hotels gutted like carcasses. But when darkness falls, the silence thickens into something else. It becomes an animal, a predator that waits for trespassers to step too far. The English explorer who first told the story of the piano often said that what unnerved him most was not the sound itself, but the silence that followed. The music would stop and then the air would become charged as if holding its breath. Something was waiting for him to respond. Something unseen demanded acknowledgement. It is at this point, when silence becomes a dialogue, that the haunting transforms from suggestion to revelation. In the months after his first encounter, the explorer could not rest. At night, he heard piano notes in his dreams, sometimes accompanied by the sound of waves crashing against marble floors. He dreamed of the lobby again and again, the piano sitting in shadow, waiting for him. Finally, against his own fear, he returned. He told no one. His companions from the first visit refused to go again. They had heard enough, seen enough. But he felt compelled, as if the unfinished melody had hooked itself into his chest. He entered alone, slipping past fences under moonlight. The city swallowed him instantly. No breeze, no sound, but his own breathing. His flashlight cut through corridors that seemed narrower than before, as though the walls had shifted inward. He felt the city was aware of him, watching. When he reached the hotel lobby, the piano was there, unchanged, waiting. He stood at a distance, refusing to draw nearer. For a long time, nothing happened. He thought perhaps the haunting had been a trick of his imagination after all. Then the music began. Not hesitant fragments, not random notes, but a melody. Faint, trembling, yet unmistakably coherent. The explorer described it later as a mournful waltz, something slow and beautiful, rising and falling with sorrow. It filled the lobby, echoed against the cracked walls, and seemed to seep into the very floor beneath his feet. And then he saw him. A figure sat at the piano, thin, suited in a tuxedo yellowed with age. His head was bowed, hair slicked back in a style from another era. His fingers moved deliberately, though they cast no shadow, though they left no prints in the dust. The explorer froze, unable to breathe. The pianist never looked up. He played as though the decades had not passed, as though an audience still sipped wine in the lounge. His music was flawless yet broken, notes occasionally faltering. as if strings within the piano resisted, as if the instrument itself groaned under the weight of time. And then, as the explorer watched, the room changed. The lobby filled with people, not suddenly, not in a rush, but gradually, as though shadows stretched and solidified into figures. Men in suits and women in long dresses appeared in the chairs, their faces pale, their outlines blurred. They clapped softly, raised glasses that held no liquid, whispered to one another in voices too faint to decipher. The explorer realized he was standing in the middle of a performance that had been going on for 40 years, repeating itself endlessly. For an audience of the dead, the pianist played, and the crowd murmured, and the air vibrated with something more than sound. It was despair. Longing, nostalgia made flesh. The explorer should have fled, but he could not move. Something bound him there. He felt that if he left, the melody would never release him. So he stayed, trembling, listening. The waltz grew louder, more urgent. The phantom audience began to shift. Their faces distorted, stretching into expressions of anguish. Their applause turned to frantic clapping, their whispers to moans. Some figures rose from their seats, reaching out with hands that faded into smoke before touching him. The pianist, too, changed. His head lifted, and the explorer saw that his eyes were hollow sockets, dark wells that seemed to absorb light. His fingers struck the keys harder, though the sound remained eerily graceful. The melody bent into dissonance, twisting into something violent, as if grief had curdled into rage. The chandelier above swayed, though no wind moved. Mirrors on the walls cracked in spiderweb patterns. The air grew icy. The explorer felt something press against his chest, as though invisible hands tried to push him toward the piano. In panic, he tore himself free, stumbling backward. The audience dissolved into shadows. The pianist slammed his hands upon the keys in one final chord that rattled the entire building, then silence. The piano was empty. He fled into the streets, gasping, but the city would not release him. Every window he passed seemed to hold a face staring out. Every alley whispered his name. The sea roared louder than before, as if mocking his escape. He realized then what Varosha truly was. It was not a ruin, not merely an abandoned city. It was a stage. Every street, every hotel, every lobby was part of an endless performance, a ritual replaying the night of 1974 again and again. The ghosts were not individuals. They were fragments of memory, stitched into an eternal drama, and he had stepped into the play. As he reached the edge of the city, nearing the fence where he had entered, he heard it. A voice. Soft, feminine, close behind him. Stay. He froze. The word was gentle, not a threat, but a plea. He turned, but the street was empty. The piano's melody began again, faint in the distance, carried on the wind. The explorer ran. In the weeks that followed, he was never the same. He confessed his story online, though few believed him. He described hearing piano music in waking life, faint but constant, as though Varosha's melody had followed him home. He avoided silence, keeping televisions and radios on at all hours. Yet still the phantom notes seeped through. Dreams consumed him. Dreams of sitting at the piano himself, fingers moving without his will, an audience of faceless figures watching. In these dreams, he always played the same waltz, and he always woke with tears on his face. Some say he disappeared years later, returning once more to Cyprus and never coming back. Whether this is truth or rumor, no one knows. But his tale became the foundation of Varosha's legend, the climax of its haunting. Why does this story terrify us so deeply? Perhaps because it touches something primal, the fear of being drawn into the past, of being trapped in repetition, of becoming part of a memory that refuses to end. Varosha is not haunted by a single ghost. It is haunted by the act of haunting itself. It is a place where memory has grown teeth, where sorrow has taken shape, where music becomes a chain. The piano is the city's heart. Each note is a pulse, and as long as it plays, Varosha will never rest. But endings are never true in ghost stories. They only shift. The explorer's escape was temporary. The city waits. The pianist waits. The phantom audience waits. And perhaps the next time someone enters, the performance will not end so kindly. The explorer's story was never meant to end neatly. That perhaps is what makes it linger, like the echo of a piano note that refuses to fade. Years passed after his second visit, and yet the haunting did not diminish. It grew, stretched, found ways to spill beyond Varosha's walls. Those who heard his confession, whether through late-night forums, obscure podcasts, or whispered retellings, began to report their own encounters. Strange dreams, phantom music, a sense of being watched whenever they read his words aloud. It is said that stories, when told with enough intensity, become doorways, and Varosha is a city of locked doors waiting to be opened. Rumor insists the explorer returned to Cyprus one final time. The year's uncertain, some claim 2017, others say 2019. What is certain is that he went alone, leaving no record except fragments, an airline ticket never used for a return flight, an abandoned rental car near the Famagusta fence. What compelled him? Perhaps the voice that whispered stay had never left him. Perhaps the melody had consumed him to the point that silence itself became unbearable. He entered Varosha at night. No photographs survive, no footage, only speculation. But those who live near the fenced perimeter recall that on that night, across the water, faint music was heard, clearer than ever before. A piano, drifting over the waves. Inside the hotel, things had changed. The explorer found the lobby much as he had before, but it was darker now, not merely in light, but in essence. The walls seemed to pulse, as though the building itself were breathing. The chandelier swayed in rhythm with something unseen, and the air smelled of salt and rust. The piano sat waiting. He approached, trembling. His body ached as though he had carried this moment for decades. He lifted his hand, hesitant, and placed his fingers upon the keys. The sound was immediate, loud, resonant, alive. The piano played through him, his muscles seizing, his hands moving without his will. The melody returned, the waltz, sorrowful, endless. And as it played, the hotel shifted. The floor fell away, revealing black water beneath. The ceiling opened into stars, though no constellations he recognized. The walls dissolved into fog. He was no longer in a hotel lobby. He was inside the music itself. Figures emerged again, but not merely suited men and elegant women. These were soldiers in uniform, their faces streaked with blood, children clutching toys, families in nightclothes, eyes wide with terror. All the souls torn from Varosha in 1974, sitting in silent rows, watching him. Their gaze was unbearable. Not angry, not vengeful, simply demanding. They wanted recognition. They wanted someone to play their grief aloud, to give voice to what had been silenced. The explorer's fingers bled against the keys, yet he could not stop. He realized then that the pianist he had seen before was never a ghost at all. It was a role, a seat to be filled, a curse passed from one to another, and now it was his. As the final notes of the waltz rang out, the explorer lifted his head. His reflection in the polished piano lid showed not his own face, but another's, a man in a tuxedo, hollow-eyed. His mouth curved in a tragic smile. The phantom audience rose in unison, bowing their heads, acknowledging the new performer. Then they dissolved into smoke, into silence, into nothing. The explorer remained seated at the piano, waiting for the next encore. That same year, Cyprus announced partial reopening of Varosha. Journalists and tourists were allowed limited access to the once forbidden city. Most found only ruins, decay, and a strange stillness. But a few reported something else. Visitors walking past the old hotel swore they heard piano music. Soft, mournful, drifting through broken windows. Some thought it a trick of imagination, or wind playing through wires. Others grew pale, insisting the melody followed them long after leaving. One tourist, a woman from Athens, claimed she saw a figure at the piano. Not clearly, just a silhouette in the shadows. When she lifted her phone to record, the battery drained instantly. She fled, shaken, and refused to re-enter. Today, the tale of the phantom piano circulates freely online. Some dismiss it as urban legend, a ghost story born from the internet's hunger for mystery. Others believe it a collective haunting, that the story itself spreads like an infection, lodging in the minds of those who hear it, ensuring the music never dies. But those who spend time in Varosha's ruins speak with more certainty. They say the piano is real. They say it plays at midnight. They say a figure always sits at it now, and that if you look too long, he might notice you. Here is where the story ends, or refuses to. If you listen closely, even now, you might hear it. Not from Cyprus, not from ruins, but from somewhere nearer. A faint piano note, hesitant, insistent. Perhaps it is your imagination. Perhaps the story has placed it there, but perhaps not. Ghosts are not bound by walls, nor by oceans, nor by time. The melody of Varosha is not confined to a piano in a ruined hotel. It is a pattern, a chain of sound carried forward by every retelling. You have heard it now. You carry it with you. And tonight, when the room grows quiet and the world holds its breath, you may find yourself straining your ears. You may hear a single note. You may remember this story and wonder if the performance has reached you, if you have become part of the audience, and if one day you find yourself dreaming of a hotel lobby by the sea, with sand covering the marble and dust floating in pale light. Remember this: the piano will be waiting, and it does not matter whether you choose to stay or run, the music will follow.